Hello and welcome to Moving Beyond Stigma. I am your host, Michelle Crossman. This is Season 2, Episode 2. At Moving Beyond Stigma, we are here to talk about all things mental health, and today we have a very special guest joining. They are a gender specialist, clinician, consultant, educator, and author. Please welcome Rebecca Miner.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. I'm very excited to have you here today and see where this conversation goes. I would love to get started with just you sharing a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Rebecca Miner. I use she, her, they pronouns, and I am a gender specialist, which means I partner with queer and trans youth in their journey of becoming and am a guide to their parents in affirming it. So what that looks like in practice is I am a therapist. I have a group practice where I provide individual and group therapy as well as parent coaching. So that's the kind of clinical side of my work. I also am part-time faculty at Boston University School of Social Work, and I provide cultural humility training to businesses and organizations. So
Amazing.
A little bit of me.
Yeah, little range of things, but it's all interconnected as well. That's really beautiful. What got you into this work specifically? Like, what was your little journey to get there?
Sure. So I think especially because of the type of work that I do, people assume that it's either because of my own journey or, I must have like a sibling or a parent or a somebody that I'm close to. And what's interesting is I came to this work in part because of my own journey, but also it really wasn't until a little ways into the work that more and more people around me started coming out and it felt more personally relevant. So it was actually kind of backwards. But I took a course in undergrad that was a required writing seminar, and I was able to choose which one out of the list that they provided. So I took a course called Queer and Pleasant Danger. Which at 18 in 2007, it felt pretty radical and not language anyone had used with me at that age or at that point in my life. I was not like aware that queer could be a word that was positive.
Exactly.
And so it's actually the word I use to describe my own identity now. But it took me a while to get there. I took that course, and it was during that course that I read my first trans memoir, which was Kate Bornstein's book. It's called 101 Reasons Not to Kill Yourself. Wow. And hearing her story and really like a much more grounded and real narrative of a trans person as opposed to what I'd seen in the media at that point, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like, I just want to help people be authentically who they are, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do therapy. I double majored in theater and psychology. So it was like a mix of those worlds fell really beautifully into this queer space. And that's the origin story.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely beautiful. Moments like that where you just like, it clicks in you and you're like, oh, this is absolutely what I want to do. I love how those worlds are so interconnected too. And like dancer, artist, actor over here, but also huge mental health. Like it's just so intertwined.
Right. And it always made sense to me. Other people would be like, what? Those are two like really like different majors. And I was like, I see them.
But they're so connected.
Yeah. And my theater degree has informed my clinical work forever.
Yes.
Right. And I'm able to do some of the work that I do now because of both of those paths.
Working with those two together, I feel like it could easily add so much more fluidity to the practice that you do instead of this like very black and white, westernized way that a lot of it just kind of is. So then you add all this into it, and then there's more freedom and more room for the love and the joy and what you really want to do with it and bring into it.
Exactly.
I feel like I need to read that memoir. I got goosebumps when you were talking about it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Loud and
Yeah.
clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been meaning to, but I haven't actually read it again since
Yeah.
then.
Fair.
Maybe I did. No, but it's been a long time. I could definitely use a refresher. I
Yeah.
hope it's aged well. It
Yeah.
might, some of the language, so much of the language in the LGBTQ plus space shifts so rapidly that
Yeah.
it's hard to keep books, especially
Yes.
using terminology that we're currently using.
Exactly. Yeah. Because once it's there, it's on paper, and then you're like, okay.
Exactly.
I wanted to bring it back for a moment to using the label queer, where we didn't hear it so much as like a positive word. Like it was used a lot of times as an insult, specifically in media and just in real life. Same. I had that very, very similar experience there. What was it like for you to kind of, I guess, just start claiming that word back again, like in a positive way?
It didn't feel that dramatic to me by the time I claimed it, I think. I'd gotten really comfortable with the word by that point. But the difficulty in claiming it, I think, was more in terms of the fact that I didn't have a lot of possibility models for what my life currently looked like and how that could also be a queer life.
Yes.
So and this is something I talk about with more frequency these days, but I am married to a cisgender man. And so that often is a like, what? How does that work?
Right?
Like, it's actually not that confusing.
It's not.
But yeah, so I think for a long time I was just like, well, I can't say that because like that's not what I didn't fully recognize that like both of these things could be true.
Yes, exactly. They can both coexist at the same time.
Right. And that like the gender of my partner doesn't determine my orientation.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I love that. That's been, I feel like it's such a common, specifically, with bi or pan or queer, again, the fluidity there. But especially if you are partnered with someone who is cis and straight, specifically, and like the mental gymnastics that it can take for you to be okay with it within yourself, just because of all of the compet and the things that you hear outside, and like it feels like it can easily take away from your with how you identify, and it doesn't at all. It doesn't change any of it.
Right.
But it's hard to like tell yourself that and truly believe it.
Yes. I think that's the sticking point. Yeah.
Yeah. It's much easier to say to other people and be like,
completely.
No, like, it doesn't change who you are. Like, you are still the exact same beautiful queer human.
Right.
But for yourself, it's like, oh, wait.
Right. Yeah, there's so many questions and so much imposter syndrome that I think happens for folks.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the things I didn't talk about in my introduction is I hold a space for bi plus folks who are navigating identity in straight passing relationships or straight presenting relationships. And that's been such an interesting experience. Witnessing people at really different points in their process too.
Yeah.
Of like, all the way from, I don't know, sometimes I have like this thought about myself, but then I get nervous and I think, I can't even go there, through, folks who are actively dating and really comfortable and confident in their identity. But I think it's been really important for all of those people to share space and be able to affirm each other's identities when moving through the world on a day-to-day basis. That identity is often erased.
Yes, definitely is. And so quickly and so easily that it's almost not like you don't notice it. And then you're like, wait,
right.
I'm not
like you're
here.
Like, actually I have to actively come out to ensure that I'm not being misread.
Exactly. And that can be so exhausting, especially if you're doing it on your own. So that's wonderful that you've created that community for that.
Yeah. And like, I always, when I hold the other like caveat here of like, there's a lot of privilege that comes with that, right? Like I've been able to do a lot of the things that I do and move safely through the world because I'm read in a particular way.
Yeah.
And that safety isn't afforded to everyone.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's complicated.
So complicated. Talking a little bit more about your work with trans youth specifically, because I know you work with them quite closely, and I would love to hear a little bit more about what that's been like for you.
So I've spent the last 7 years in private practice where really the majority of my clients and session time has been dedicated to working with trans youth. So I think I can pretty confidently say we spend a lot of time together.
Yes.
And it's been challenging.
Yeah.
And incredible. Like I am deeply grateful for my work, and I love the young people that I work with. And the last couple years especially have grown increasingly hard.
Yes.
As there's been such a significant increase in anti-trans legislation.
Yeah.
The work's just gotten harder.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, not only do we have to work against people's own internalized homophobia, transphobia, whatever, we also have to deal with the external forces that are pretty loudly telling young people that they're either not welcome or they're not allowed to be themselves, or that accessing, you know, basic human rights and healthcare might not be available to them.
Yeah. It's been progressively getting harder and harder, as you said, and I can imagine so heartbreaking just to be up close and personal with that many people as well, right there, while they're the ones feeling that effect so closely. And I wish there was more spaces like that, you know, like whether like we here, even like we have some community-based things, but like it's still so lacking. And it shouldn't be that hard to find something somewhere to go just to feel welcomed and supported, and like some space where you can just start to understand yourself and have support along the way.
Absolutely.
Just so necessary, especially for all of their like mental health, including physical health, of course, because I know there's specifically in the States, there's a lot of like places where nobody can get any care.
Yes. Yeah. And I was going to say, I realized I, you know, didn't name that I practice in the Boston area. So I'm in a place where my clients and my job is pretty well protected.
Yes.
But when I provide coaching, that's all over the country and actually international, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are plenty of states, a very scary number of who are losing that comfort and access to care. Yeah. And I know it's not all fun and games in Canada either.
Oh, no. We've definitely been feeling that as well. It always feels like a little bit of a trickle in. We like, it feels like they just like wait for something to happen in the States. And then those same kinds of people here are just like, okay, now it's our turn. So, you know, and then they do it right after. And it happens every time. Like, and it's terrifying.
And the NHS in the UK just banned blockers. So it's like there are major forces at play.
Oh, God, yeah. It's been absolutely horrific and hugely widespread. I would love to hear what some of the things that you find are most important in supporting trans youth.
I think believing them when they tell you who they are is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Taking any discomfort or like prying questions elsewhere is a good thing to do too. You know, I think we often have questions and that's okay. But that shouldn't be the young person's responsibility. to answer all of those questions, to do that education, or to hold any grief or any other feelings that folks might be having. Continuous positive regard and like love and showing up and taking them to things like events and community so that they can be connected to community. I think those are probably some of the most important things.
Yeah.
It's like your support will matter, and that's great. And they need to see that there are other people like them.
Yes.
And be in connection and in community.
Yeah. Yeah. Community as a whole is so incredibly important. And as being like millennial generation, you know, like I definitely never found queer community until so much later.
Right.
And then so like part of that journey over the last probably 5, 6, 7 years or so has been just healing that inner child and teenager that never had it.
Right.
You know? And I teach kids as well through dance, and I've had a couple like come out to me as trans and non-binary, and it's only happened a couple times, but both few times that happened, it's been the most beautiful experience to like one feel like you are somebody that they feel safe with to share that with.
Huge.
It's such a privilege to be in that position and like hear that from somebody and be up close and experience who they are and them being proud of who they are and sharing that with you. It's so beautiful. And letting them, finding space to find their community, whether, you know, there is options out there, and being able to kind of guide them in that direction or physically bring them there too, depending on their age, you know, like just go with them. And then you as a parent or a friend or guardian or whoever you are that's supporting them will learn so much along the way as well. So I love that. That's such a, that's a powerful piece that I think can be easily just kind of looked over. You know, like I'm here, I'm supporting you and I love you and all these things, but okay, but what else?
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Like the action.
Yeah. The action matters.
It's a very big deal, especially, well, for everybody, but especially for youth. Like it's those big steps that matter, you know, the ones that are showing you like, I am here. I'm not just listening to you.
Right.
I'm doing even more. And then I guess any like tips you might have for even trans youth themselves for being able to like ask for what they need, because that can also be so difficult.
That's a tough question to answer without more context.
No, that's
right.
Like, yes.
Because there are going to be some things that are perfectly safe and okay to do in some families or some circumstances or communities that wouldn't in others. But I think my overall answer, obviously with people making their own thoughtful decisions, knowing their own context, to continue to feel like abundantly confident in who you are and not allow some of this other riffraff to get in your way. And I think part of that is learning the skill of asking for what you need.
Yes.
And you might not know what that is, and that's okay too. Trust yourself and your own like instincts. If it feels like something that you're interested in or you feel like it would be beneficial to you, then I think it's worth, you know, raising it to the grown-ups or whomever in your life to support you in connecting with community in that way or whatever the resource is. I think when it comes to therapy, that's a hard thing to sometimes ask for or tell your parents that you need. I think parents and caregivers have a well-intended but challenging kind of gut reaction sometimes to feeling like they weren't good enough or they did something wrong when young people are like, I need therapy. And so I think that's their work to do. But to get around it, I think a great way to introduce it is more about just how helpful it would be to have time and a neutral person to help you think more about who you are and who you're becoming.
Yeah, that neutrality. I love that you put it that way, because that's incredibly, incredibly powerful and true. And so important. Like,
and like, we're all trying to figure out who we are. You don't have to say, you
Exactly.
know, I like want to see a gender specialist because I think I'm trans, if you're not ready to say that yet.
Exactly.
You could just be interested in learning more about who you are and who you're becoming.
Yeah, and then having that outside perspective and someone to talk to who's not directly involved with you in any other way definitely can provide that safe space for you to do that without having the pressure or worry or having any external factors or feelings kind of affecting that. It's just you and the therapist.
Right.
When it comes to activacy, I've seen many, like even in your blogs and your posts that you've mentioned, and I love the way you say it, talking about active allyship, not just
I'm so
allyship.
Glad. That's my pride campaign of the season.
Yes, it really
for active allyship. Yeah. I'm so glad it stood out to you.
Yeah. I would love to hear what that can look like for others who are allies, what that can maybe mean.
Allyship requires action. I think it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm an ally, and just kind of check the box. But that isn't what I'm talking about when I'm talking about active allyship. I think active allyship, which, you know, some people talk about, I don't know if you've seen people say that they, you know, don't need as many allies, they need accomplices. Because the idea with what it means to be an accomplice is that you have skin in the game. When I think about active allyship, it's about what you have to lose to some extent and what you're willing to risk for the sake of like to show up as as an ally. So that's a tip that I like whenever I'm asked for like what's a good allyship tip, I'm always like, get really clear on what you're willing to lose. And people are like, what? That's so dramatic. And it is dramatic, but it's real. I think until we know, like, I'm happy being the person that volunteers at an event, but I'm not going to bring it up with my conservative uncle at Thanksgiving. Then, like, you need to know that's where your limit is. And then maybe get curious about why that's your limit.
Exactly.
And if there's some growing to do there, getting clear on, am I willing to have uncomfortable conversations? Am I willing to risk my relationships or familial connections? Am I willing to, you know, stand up for what I believe in the workplace?
Yes.
If that even means that it could compromise my employment. Not all of those things are a requirement of active allyship, but I think part of active allyship is getting clear on where your limit is. So that you can be all in, at least until your limit.
Exactly. It's challenging and it takes time and work and a lot of like sitting and looking at yourself and asking questions, looking at your family and asking questions. And it's not easy at all. And it can take time, and that's okay. But like being honest with it and not just being like, yay, ally, and then not actually ever doing anything, or just being like, yes, but I love you, so I'm an ally. That's not, you know,
that's not how that works, actually.
It's not how that works.
No, that's just love, which is so great.
Love is amazing.
We're here for love.
Yes.
And love is actually not enough.
I wish it was.
Sure.
In so many ways, but it's definitely not. Like, it would be great.
In the face of 400 plus anti-LGBTQ bills in the US right now,
exactly.
Love is not enough.
It's not at all. Like, we need the action. We need the uncomfortable conversations. You need to walk away from certain things, because you not doing that is just supporting them. Like, you know, it's them still having that power space.
Right.
You know? I remember one time when it really hit me. When I was younger, I was very oblivious to a lot of things, you know, just kind of walked through life like I was very like passionate about dancing and like, you know, I loved my friends and my family, and I was always very passionate about mental health because that was always intertwined in my family from a very young age. So like I was very aware of like the lack of healthcare and lack of resources and the challenges there, and I was always very passionate about that. But outside factors like the racial inequalities and so many different things, and then the homophobia that gets placed into the medical system, like all of that, I just had no idea, because I just again was
Well, it's not part of your education.
Yeah, it's not.
It's actually been intentionally left out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're, it's there. It's not there for a reason. No one talked about anything. Everything was a joke. And then moving to Toronto and being surrounded by a lot more queer people and a lot more people of color, I started opening my eyes a lot more. And then when I actually had my first like public queer relationship, that's when I had that hard hitting moment of, wow, what I've been doing this whole time, and me loving all of these people and me, having support for them. I was like, it was not enough. And now I'm seeing this other side. And I was very lucky. My first queer partner, she was well spoken when it came to where she stood on people respecting who she is, who everybody is as a human being, and like inequalities in the world. She was very, very clear on where she stood. So I learned a lot right away by being in a relationship with her and having difficult conversations about things. And it opened my eyes a lot. And then I remember we had voting happen here, just like I think it was just a provincial election. And I remember sitting down with my mom talking about it. And, where I was like saying how, like, when I was younger, like, I didn't understand voting that much. Like, because again, no one told us anything. I didn't understand the weight of it. Like, I really just thought it was about certain very specific things. I didn't understand, it's like literally life or death for so many people with these decisions. And I didn't know that. So when I finally, now I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand the weight of it. And we were chatting, and she like made a comment that, some people in our family definitely vote conservative. And I was like, if that ever comes up in conversation, like, I have no trouble letting them know that this is saying that you care more about the lining of the dollar bills in your pocket than you do about me.
Right.
It's those things like that really hit me. And I'm pretty sure that really hit my mom too, just like the reality of that. And I was like, but that's what they're voting for. Like, it's all encompassing, it's all connected. And we don't talk about that. It's very much the like, we don't talk about politics at this table, or like that's kind of like how so many of us were raised. I'm like, no, but we should be, like, even if it's uncomfortable, let's make it uncomfortable. Like, it should not be this pleasant conversation, because politics are not pleasant, and they're not.
No, and actually lives depend on it.
Yeah, it's easy to be oblivious to it when you don't know. But then once you start looking, you like, at least for me, I couldn't stop looking. Like, I just started getting deeper and deeper and deeper in it, just needing to know more. So I was like, I need to be more educated and well-versed on all of this, because I don't want the world to look like this. I don't want, like, I want people to get the care that they deserve, because they should. Nobody is any less human.
Right.
It's a big one. The active allyship, that needs to be like really talked about more, because...
Yeah, and I think it depends on people really clarifying their personal why too. Of like, you can say you care about any community of people, but what's your why? And that's where we come back to that concept of like having skin in the game.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't want you to do this just because you have a cousin or a somebody or whatever. I want you to do this because you see the ways in which we're all actively being harmed by the limitations of our binary thinking around gender and sexuality. Yeah.
It's extremely harmful. I need to take all those blinders down and look at it straight on, no matter how hard it is and how much grief it gives you. It's a challenge to actually hold yourself accountable and do that. But it's so rewarding, I think, when you do, because then you can finally be like, oh, I see it now. And there's so much love and joy that comes from knowing that you are making a difference with actually standing up for other people and knowing your why and moving forward with that. When it comes to queer and trans youth, what changes would you love to see in the mental health system that could really be beneficial for them?
I would like to see training around gender and sexuality be a requirement of all licensure. I think in the same way as clinicians, we need to be culturally competent around other marginalized populations. We also need to be equipped to see people of diverse gender and sexual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The work is limited when clinicians can't kind of hold that space and clients have to be the ones educating them.
Mm-hmm.
The therapeutic alliance, I feel like, gets strained, and it doesn't allow for the real work that could be happening to occur. I had a client who saw a therapist who asked on the first session if she had a boyfriend, and she said no, because that was true. But she didn't disclose that she had a girlfriend because the question was never asked.
Yes.
Right. And so in one very simple word choice, they lost a possibility at a really deep connection.
Yeah.
Clinically. They continued to work together for a year. But throughout that entire time, the client never disclosed anything about her own identity or that relationship.
Yeah.
They just talked about other things. And I think when clinicians aren't trained to properly ask questions or to give intake forms or even that initial call, like there are so many touch points along the way before we even get into the clinical room.
Yes,
to provide more culturally informed care. And we need to see that at every level, whether it's like in the therapeutic space, in medical spaces, everywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
I think about that a lot when I, go to the OBGYN. Like, not everyone who needs to see an OB or an OBGYN is a woman, but is there any indicator of any of that? Like anywhere in the lobby, anywhere, like are the forms inclusive of that? Or is everything pink and everything's like, hey ladies?
Exactly.
In which case, like that's not informed, competent care. There's a long way to go.
Yeah. It starts, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the training, because it's right from there, like not enough has ever been happening, whether it be like queer relationships, polyamorous relationships, different cultural backgrounds relationships. Like when it comes to all that, like it is hard to find anyone that you can actually talk about these things with as a therapist.
Right.
Because so many don't have the training, because it's
right.
If
and
you
it
want
baffles me. Like so often clinicians will be like, oh, well, I'm referring this case to you because, I can't handle this. And when I inquire more about it, it's really just that they're like, they don't know how.
Yeah.
And it's not for lack of other clinical skills, but it's lack of education and awareness around some really important pieces that are necessary.
Right back in that basic training.
Yeah. And there's another example of like active allyship. When I go to doctor's appointments, I modify their forms.
Yeah. I love that.
like if it's on paper, I will just like cross something out and be like, I think you meant this. Because like the sex and gender get screwed up all the time. And like the part that asks if you're married or not, or like, there's no box for someone who is in any other kind of relationship structure.
Yes.
Right. There's so many points along the way where we can, swing and a miss.
Yeah. And those little things, and like, they make an incredible difference. Like just to feel safe, which is not easy. And just to feel seen and like you're actually going to be cared for, whether it comes to just any kind of physical health, when it comes to your mental health, like it's a big deal to actually feel safety and care. And it is so easily just quickly looked over as just, a teeny detail that doesn't matter. It matters. Like it's life and death mattering.
Right.
Starting right from the top, getting that education in is such a big deal. And instead of, those things should be absolutely required for everybody, like, you know, and it should be one of those things where, like, if you've already been a clinician for so long, okay, well, now you have to go back and be certified in these things. Like,
Absolutely.
why not?
Make it part of the continuing education credits.
Exactly. Before we head out, I did also see that you have a book coming out.
Yes.
So I'd love to just chat a little bit about that. You can throw in a little...
thanks for bringing it up. I haven't worked it into my initial like spiel about myself, so I don't I forget that I'm like, oh yeah, people know about that now. I can talk about that. So I am writing a book called Raising Trans Youth: What to Expect When You Weren't Expecting This. It is a short and digestible guide, hopefully. It's hard for me to limit things, but I know parents and caregivers and educators and clinicians are busy. And so I wanted to make it really attainable, and something that someone could, you know, have a quick concern, go to the glossary, you know, go to the table of contents or the glossary, and be able to flip right to whatever their concern is, and get the information that they need without it being this big laborious process.
Yes.
So that is coming out in fall of 2025. So we've still got some time. But I'm excited for it to be in the world. I wish it was going to be out sooner. It feels like it's desperately needed. I'm excited about it. And I appreciate you bringing it up. It's being published by Row House, which is a really cool publisher that's very values aligned. So I'm proud to be working with queer and woman-owned, BIPOC, all the things.
I'm glad you're able to put something tangible out into the world that people can just get their hands on and hold, and that could help them all the way at home anytime that they need, you know?
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you. It's exciting. So more to come on that front.
Of course. Well, is there any other final thoughts you would like to share?
I think we need all the allyship we can get right now.
Yes.
It's a particularly trying time for adults, certainly, but also for youth.
Yeah.
And a stat that I like to share, you know, I think it's very easy to get focused on the really depressing stats and the ones that, you know, that show that trans youth are committing suicide 4 times the national average.
Yeah.
That is true. And what I want people to take away from this conversation and conversations like this is that it doesn't matter what role you play in young people's lives. You can be a neighbor, you can just be a random person. Like, you don't have to be someone's parent or coach or whatever role to have a positive impact and remind them that they are loved and you want them here. And the Trevor Project shows that just having one affirming adult can reduce suicidality and depression by 40%.
Yeah.
So, like, that's really powerful. And you can be that one person.
Exactly. Yes, that is actually making an incredible impact just by being that person for one human. You can literally change a whole direction of their life, because that's how important and valuable community and support is. Thank you for sharing that. I've seen that stat on Trevor Project before, and it's so powerful and such a beautiful one to kind of hold on to and remind each other of, that like we can do something when it feels like we can't. There is things that we can do. There are little steps that we can take that do make an impact, even if it doesn't feel like a big impact. It is.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again, Rebecca, for joining. Once more, this is Moving Beyond Stigma, and until next time.